Jim, it's natural for us here to want to compare two Sweet 16 teams. How do you see that comparison, strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I think both teams had great senior leadership. Both teams have just a terrific backcourt and a very productive bench. You know, just key guys who can come in and help you with whatever you might need, scoring or defense or rebounding. So there are some similarities for sure.
What are the differences?
Well, that team had more the 2013 team had more inside scoring. Kenny Kaji in around the basket was a 6'11", 245-pound, very good low post player. He didn't like playing in the low post. He would prefer to shoot a three. And then Julian Gamble and Reggie Johnson were also. So you had kind of a three-headed monster there. We do it much more with perimeter play. But I think also the difference in our front court is Kamari Murphy and Tanya Jakiri are outstanding defenders and rebounders, whereas we needed to do it, kind of as a team effort that year. Even Shane and Duran and Trey McKinney-Jones were pretty good rebounders. Our perimeter are good rebounders as well, but Tanya and Kamari are really high-level rebounders and defenders.
As far as like an intangible quality, something that you wouldn't necessarily see?
Well, I think both teams have that grit, that toughness. This was the time though where that 2013 ran into health issues. Reggie Johnson had knee surgery. Duran Scott caught an elbow in the mouth and had to have his teeth wired together just before we left. And then Shane Larkin came down with food poisoning the night before we played Marquette. So hopefully we can avoid that.
Coach, I want to ask you about Angel. Just talking to some people who have coached him in the past, they sort of said he always had a knack for playing his best in the biggest moments. And it seems sort of like that at Miami too. Is that something that
I think it's part of in his nature. He has one of those, I don't know what it's called, like a Napoleon complex. Like, basketball's a big man's game, and I'm an undersized guard, and people don't respect me enough, and I'm going to take over the world type attitude. So he plays with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, a very good chip. He's not afraid of the competition. He invites it. He's challenged by it. And when he's challenged, he really raises his level of concentration and focus. And it shows in all aspects of his game.
Has he ever, I was talking again to some of his past coaches, one of them told a funny story about he sort of yelled back at the coach once and then apologized immediately afterwards, felt really bad about it. He's not like a fiery guy though, right? Except maybe on the court, he's sort of more of a nice guy. Like how?
Well, I think he's a people person. I think he really likes engaging with people. Like that's why I'm sure from a media standpoint, he's a darling to interview. He's bright. I mean, here's a young man at 15 years old, didn't speak a word of English, and now he's got the command of the English language. I told him he's going to maybe be able to use that for a career. I could see him being the Spanish version of like Dick Vitale.
Maybe a little less bombastic.
Speaking of Kamari, just could you talk maybe a little bit about his contribution, particularly the last couple of games? Thursday night, I'm not sure what he could have, and might not have won.
Oh well, Kamari is a huge key because of his versatility to guard all different kinds of players. Like when we started the Buffalo game and the Wichita State game, we knew we were going to have to switch at the 4. We didn't. We were hoping we wouldn't have to switch at the 5. When Tanya got in foul trouble, we moved Kamari over to the 5 so that we could switch it to 5 because the kid Perkins from Buffalo started making threes. Now against Wichita State, when Tanya got in foul trouble, they didn't have a stretch 5. They had a beast of a low post player in Morris, and Kamari's strong enough, athletic enough to guard big guys too. So he gives us a lot of versatility at that 4-5 position.
Is this more of a conventional matchup that Tanya is about to face? You know, it looks like they're pretty much the same
Yeah.
player, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I think Oshefu is a ball screener, roller, A area, what we call the A area, near around the basket, A area player, rebounder, shot blocker, defender. So there are a lot of similarities. I would compare him to Zach August, a guy who's very active at both ends of the court and a key component to their offense and defense.
What was your reaction to Villanova's win yesterday and their play last weekend?
Well, I think it's consistent with what we've seen from Villanova, not only this season, but throughout the years. They're an outstanding team at both ends of the court. I've mentioned it before, Jay Wright and I are very good friends. We've competed against each other. My George Mason teams played them in Puerto Rico. We played them in the Old Spice Classic. We played them in the NCAA tournament. We've been on trips together. And most recently, in the last couple of years, we've been talking offensive drills. We've shared three-point shooting drills. His team must be doing very well with that because they're making almost half their baskets are threes. And they start 4 guys who can shoot threes. 2 of them we recruited very hard. Josh Hart and Chris Jenkins were very, very high on our recruiting list. And we have the utmost respect for them as people and as players. We're very familiar with them. They both come out of the Washington, D.C. area and the team takeover AAU program where James Palmer is from. So he knows those guys very well. So we feel like we match up pretty well with them. Probably the biggest difference offensively is Chris Jenkins is a dynamic three-point shooter.
Coach, when looking at their tape, do they remind you of Buffalo, the way they spread the floor, and like you said, they can shoot the threes so well?
Well, I think that the difference in playing a Villanova, they have high-level guard play. When you look at Brunson and Archie and Josh Hart and Phil Booth, those guys were high-level recruits, 5-star type players who everybody wanted. Buffalo, they were kind of unknown to us. You know, it was first time seeing them, not really familiar with their personnel. Perkins was a surprise, I think, even for Buffalo because he didn't start out shooting threes. He kind of ended the season really making a lot of threes. So he was a hard matchup for us. But I think this one is more similar to what we're used to.
Jim, you mentioned recruiting. You guys obviously went to Philadelphia, and Jaquan was the top recruit on their board at one time. Just, I guess, generally, how did that recruitment go, and what did it mean for you guys to land a player like that?
Well, Jaquan Newton and Phil Booth are in the same recruiting class, and Villanova was recruiting those 2 and I think 1 or 2 other guys to fill one of their guard positions. Jaquan, coming from the city of Philadelphia, they were very familiar with him, and he was very familiar with Villanova. And if I understand the story correctly, they told him if it got into the July recruiting period and he hadn't committed to them, there was a possibility they might get a commitment from somebody else. But Jaquan wanted to wait and go through the July recruiting period before he made his decision. And then eventually Villanova got the commitment from Phil Booth, which kind of led to us getting Jaquan Newton, and we're very, very happy with that.
And was that the first kind of he was a top 60?
He was a top 50 guy. He played great in the NBA top 100 camp. So that was really our first top 50 recruit.
Has
I would say yes. Someone asked me, "Are you surprised?" I said, "No." What I also anticipated was the ACC would have a great year. Now we have 6 of the Sweet 16, and not one bit surprised by that. We had so many good players and teams in our league this year that every game was a major challenge, no matter who you were facing, whether it be at home or on the road. And for us to go 13-5 and to lose out on the regular season championship by a whisker, says a lot about this team. But they've been determined since last season ended. Last year was the first year a Miami team ever played a game in April. That was quite an accomplishment. But it was in the NIT, and these guys were bound and determined to get to the NCAA tournament and play well once they got there.
Even though it was NIT, the fact that you were able to make such a deep run in that event, do you see was there any carryover from that this year?
For sure. Postseason play, we had some very tough games last year in the NIT. We went to Richmond. We were down 18 and fought our way back and won that game. We were in a last-second game with Stanford in the championship. I think all of those experiences help you, and they make your players realize that they have to have respect for every opponent. They've got to get ready for every game, and the team that plays with greater energy, greater effort, greater execution, those are the teams that are going to win.
Jim, we talked so much about Tanya's development on the court. I just wanted to ask you about just his personality, what you've seen from freshman, soccer player to now finally starting to develop more into the aggressive player, physical player you want. I know you want more still, but.
Well, to begin with Tanya, you got to start with his personality. And if you could have witnessed his relationship with my grandsons over this weekend, he got to know him at camp last couple of years, and he's just wonderful around children. He's wonderful around people. He's got an incredible sense of humor. He's so team-oriented. Everything he does is about trying to help the team win. And he's worked on every aspect of his game. He's gotten bigger, stronger, tougher, and he's focused on the defense and the rebounding. But, in a game like this one coming up on Thursday, it's very, very possible for him to have a very big offensive game because of the way we match up with Villanova. He's just a young man that continues to improve and will continue for several years to come, as I'm sure he'll be playing for many more years.
So 5 of the, you have a follow-up, I'm sorry. Okay. 5 of the coaches left, or actually half of them left are over 50, 5 are over 60. How do you relate to
How do I relate to those younger coaches? Well, with the players, I don't think I've changed much over the years. I've changed in a sense. I'm calmer now than I was when I first became a head coach. I was a wild man when I was 35 to 45 years old, and I was stomping up and down the sideline constantly. My wife used to describe what I did was I coached every dribble, every pass, every shot, every defensive play, every rebound, and every other aspect of the game. I've changed. Dr. Bob Rotella has helped me to really try to remain cool, calm, and collected on the sideline as much as possible, although there are occasions when I don't do that. But relating to the kids, I've always had that, what I would describe, that youthful enthusiasm and passion for the game. I love practice. I love watching the guys battle each other. I love watching them improve. I love that I have a great coaching staff that are my friends, that I enjoy their company when we're on the road recruiting or we're traveling to an away game, and we can discuss all different kinds of things. I love watching, like Jamal Brunt sat with Angel Rodriguez on the plane coming back from Providence for 3 hours. Now, that's hard for me to do, talk to someone for 3 hours, anybody. But it would be hard to talk to a 20-year-old. But Jamal and Chris Caputo and Adam Fish and James Johnson do a fantastic job with that.
Jim, you have personally been deep into March a few times now. How is this experience different for you?
It's very much the same. Every time it's a new experience, an exciting experience, and a new memory. This one was a little different. The ACC tournament was played in Washington, D.C. rather than in Greensboro. Got a chance to visit my old stomping grounds at George Mason. Then the first round and second round games were in Providence, where I played my college basketball, and we practiced on Mulaney Court, who was one of my college coaches. We walked up and down the Wall of Fame, which is known as Dave Gavitt Court, which was one of my other college coaches, and I have the utmost respect and pride in my time there. And I think this is new memories for me and my family, but it's also new memories for my team. I don't think anybody but Tanya has ever played in the Sweet 16. And Tanya's role on this year's team is a lot different than it was in 2013.
Are the butterflies the same
Yeah,
years ago?
yeah, it's all the same.
Does it feel like this is your life turned a little bit too? With all these personal stories that you're having?
Providence,
Stirring up all these memories?
all the
Right.
Coachella ride-along.
Yeah, who said that?
Mac, he said he's been on a Coachella ride-along.
Yeah, it's funny. He's a funny guy. Yeah, I don't know if you heard me after the game. After we won on Saturday, I said to the team, Sheldon McClellan is a very, very funny guy. During the timeout, after just 2 turnovers, he decided he should inbound the ball when he's never inbounded the ball in his entire college career. But he was so worked up, and he wanted to get involved in the press attack. But these are very lovable kids. Sheldon, you can't even, most guys, if you told them to take 20 shots, they'd take 25. Sheldon, you can't even get him to take 10. He's so team-oriented and very, very unselfish. But he's been very aggressive so far in the tournament. We hope that aggressiveness continues. We need it.
One of the things talking to players earlier this year, and you mentioned on radio today that you don't cuss and you don't allow players to, right?
That's correct.
And they said that.
Wait a minute. I don't allow them to cuss in practice. I can't control what they say in the locker room, in the dorm room, back in their apartments. I don't get involved with that. But one of our messages is success is based on self-discipline. And the definition of discipline is do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, and do it to the best of your ability every single time. I believe if you are swearing all the time, it's very likely you'll swear during a game, get yourself a technical foul, or get yourself out of sync and out of control. And we try to teach discipline, try to work on that area. My high school coach and one of my college coaches never used a vulgarity, and they were both great teachers and coaches.
And I assume you have, then you never use vulgarity then, or?
Oh, around my coaches,
No, I mean, at
my friends? Oh, no.
Ralph,
What? During games? No. In the locker room, at timeouts? No. No, never.
How hard is it to get a technical foul without using a profanity?
Well, I deserved the technical foul because I was riding them the officials very hard about being consistent at both ends of the court of what was going to be called a foul. And if you overdo that, then you earn yourself a T. And I did.
They tell you to knock it off and you don't knock it off.
Right.
Was that your first one this year?
Yeah. second of my career here at Miami, and probably my fifth in 20 years. Yeah. I think at George Mason, I got 3 in 15 years.
How does the wife react when you get one?
She always says, "Oh, he wanted that." It was strategy.
Is she right?
To a certain extent.
So you went from being a wild man, did you get more Bowling Green?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do you have any other rules besides, I mean, you obviously have other rules, but any other that, maybe lend themselves to who you are and what type of program you're trying to, like no vulgarity, no cussing, or something else?
Something that compares to that?
That maybe other programs don't do.
Dress code?
What?
Do you have a dress code? No.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, it's like when we travel, we all travel in the same warm-up, stuff like that. But it's there's nothing quite as I would say as strict as the non-swearing.
Is Dr. Rattel going to speak with them again, or was it during?
He's kind of busy.
Yeah.
He's headed to Phoenix. I'm not sure if I can work that out.
You think it helped in the first?
Well, I will tell you this. I talked to him twice already. So he's kind of guiding me.
You seem calm on the sidelines here for your years, and the few times that we saw you, George. So what was the transformation? Were you
From Bowling Green to the calmness? Well, sometimes when you first start out as a head coach, you're really trying to get your players to play really hard, to put great effort in. So you set the example by putting in great effort, and you're working everything. You see some of the young coaches around the country, Buzz Williams, Sean Miller, they're sweating through their shirts in the first half. Now, I never did that during a game, but during practices, I did all the time. And even back then, I'd jump into a drill to get them to do it right. I'd take the ball and direct my team or jump in. I was struggling with my team's lack of toughness on taking charges on baseline drives. And we were doing a drill at George Mason, and the players were driving and knocking their teammate down, and the guy was falling down almost before there was contact. And I was getting very upset with the offensive player and the defensive players for not really doing it game-like. And so I jumped in there, and I know the player's name is John Vaughn. He was a terrific player at George Mason. And I said, JV, that was what you call him, John Vaughn, JV, drive on me. And I jumped in there, and he kind of stopped just before he got to me, like so not to knock me down. I said, go as hard as you can. And then he drove like he was a locomotive. And I took the hit and slid about 10 feet back and jumped up and said, now that's the way you take a charge. And all the players were laughing hysterically. And my trainer, Debbie Corbato, grabbed me and said, don't ever do that again.
Was that the last charge of your?
Yeah, that was the last charge I took, I believe. I think so.
Coach, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but I know that you and Jay Wright are pretty friendly, and that he
Yeah.
actually had asked for you for advice about three-point
Well,
shooting.
not advice, discussion about what do you guys do for drills for three-point shooting? You know, I asked him a lot of stuff about his ball screen offense and stuff. We're on trips together. We hang out together. We're not. We only have certain opportunities to be together. So, like, we were at a gym watching like an AAU event, And the game, we weren't that interested in the kids playing. And he said to me, you got any good drills for three-point shooting? And I said, well, I can tell you what we do. And I described what we do. He said, okay, I'm going to try that. So he did, and then he texted me, hey, I like that one. We did it. It was pretty good. And
Now you're gonna pay for it.
no, here's the way I look at stuff like that. I said, I want to win, but I feel like my responsibility is to help our players to be the best that they can be. So by exchanging ideas with other coaches, and especially a great coach like Jay Wright, I learn. If he learned something from me and I learned something from him, I mean, we both benefit from that. I mean, we had Jeff Van Gundy here. We were talking stuff with him, and we told him a vocabulary word that we use, and he said, oh, I love that. I'm going to use that now. And that's how you learn. We watch videotapes and study our opponents. You know, some of my defensive philosophy came from my high school coach, but also from Dean Smith, who is the great coach in North Carolina. And Roy Williams does almost all the same things Coach Smith did. So you learn from everybody. And if Jay Wright actually used the stuff that we do, you know, good for him.
What's the vocabulary word?
Well, the expression actually is guard your yard. And he said, well, what does it mean? And we explained to Jeff Van Gundy that guard your yard is that you as an individual defender, you're guarding your man heads up. You got to be able to guard him 1 yard to the left and 1 yard to the right before you're going to get help. Because if that guy beats you in that first step, there's no way we can help you. So by guarding your yard, we can put players in help position, and you won't get beat if you can take away that first dribble.
You were talking about Jay setting up a home and home?
No, I don't think we have. I did play them when I was at George Mason, but they wouldn't come to our place. That was one of those, high majors versus mid majors. No, you can come to Villanova, but we're not going to George Mason.
Coach, any other ways that you think you are good at relating to your players?
Well, I guess my answer to that would be most of my coaching is based on my parenting philosophy. And when I was a young father, I started telling I'm thinking of a story. It's very funny. When I was a young father, I told my boys stories. And most of the stories had some kind of moral, trying to teach them something about life itself. And the stories had special characters. The one set of characters was Hercules and Mercury. I told a gazillion stories about the fastest guy in the world and the strongest guy in the world. And I kind of compared them to my sons. I wanted my sons to think that they were the fastest and the strongest. The other character was Zorro. I was a big Zorro fan growing up. And Zorro took on two different personalities. One, he was the nice guy, pleasant to everybody in town, got along with everybody. And the other one, he donned the mask and cape and sword and became the defender of all people. So the story I was thinking about is I would tell my sons the story of how Zorro as a young boy was a very avid student, and he wanted to learn everything he possibly could about everything, about academics. I don't know if Zorro actually did care about schoolwork, but in my story he did. And then he had to learn how to duel with a sword, how to ride a horse, became a great horseman, and he had a great instructor. And I couldn't come up with a name when I was talking to my son John, who at the time was probably 5 or 6 years old. And the only Spanish name I could come up with was Don Quixote. Do you know who Don Quixote is? So I said Don Quixote was Zorro's teacher and taught him all these different things. When my son John got to high school, in his Spanish class, I think it was Spanish, either it was Spanish or English class, they were studying the Man of La Mancha. And the teacher asked, does anybody know who Don Quixote was? And John's hand immediately went up. And the teacher asked him, who's Don Quixote? And he said, Zorro's teacher. And everybody in the class busted up laughing, and he got in big trouble.
It was your fault.
He came home and ripped me good. But throughout my coaching career, I have constantly, repeatedly told story after story that always had a lesson to be learned.
Is that something they can remember?
Well, the players then remember some of the stories. They don't remember a lot of them, but they remember some of them. And it allows me to go back. So if I tell them a story in September, and like now in March, I think it relates to what we're doing, I can say to them, remember when I told you this story? And a lot of the stories are about like players. You know, tell them a story about a former player, like an Antonio Daniels or a Shane Larkin, a Duran Scott. Some of the stories are about things that aren't so pleasant for me to remember, about Reggie Johnson or Kenny Kaji doing some craziness. And
No Hercules and Mercury, though?
no, I haven't told any college players about Zorro. No Hercules and Mercury. I do tell those to my grandchildren now, though. Do you see my grandsons on TV?
They were dancing a lot during
How old are
games.
they?
Well, I have 3 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. The granddaughter's the oldest, she's 13. Her brother is 10, and the other 2 boys who are brothers are 7 and 5.